Okay, this is going to be off the top of my head, so I apologize if there are gaps or pauses or whatever. I also apologize for not having a shirt on, which is not my style, but I just got out of the shower because that's where I do my best thinking, and this just hit me while I was in the shower. The whole watchmaker proposition, whatever, where something's so complex it had to be designed or whatever. If we ignore the basic problem with that, and we just... Sorry, I accidentally stopped the video. Anyway, if we just think of the whole watchmaking process in evolutionary terms, I think that lends an interesting facet to this argument, because if we consider the pure manufacturing process of creating a watch, like a single type of watch, as reproduction, and we consider human manipulation of the design of the watch as the genetic code, and then we go back in time to the beginnings of watchmaking, even before that, and humans come on the landscape, whether they were created or not, doesn't matter, and immediately they recognize that there is such a thing as time. Day is separated from night. The morning looks different than that. Midday and afternoon looks different from midday, so obviously there's a progression of time. And then eventually they observe that shadows create a sort of breakdown of the time as they move along. So we'll use sundial as the basic watch, okay? And sundial is a very simplistic design, a very simple way of telling time. It's not very accurate, but it gives you an idea of time. The sundial is similar to bacteria that we see today that have probably existed for eons, billions of years. Very simple design. It works. The sundial still exists, though very rarely used. Right? For a time, it was the end-all, be-all of genetic code, in this instance represented by man. The sundial gradually started to change. It went from a simple circle with the triangle that showed the angle of the sun and broke it down into quarters, and then evolved to break it down into hours, and then evolved further to break it down into half hours, etc., etc. Once man had a need to travel freely, this environmental influence put pressure on the sundial so that it had to evolve into a more easily transportable item. Therefore, the sundial evolved into the basic structure of the sundial evolved to be a water clock. Water clocks are based on sundials. Sundials were originally the timekeepers for water clocks. And as water clocks became more and more accurate, they eventually overtook the sundial as the preferred method of timekeeping. When they originally came into being, water clocks were measured, or their standard was set by the sundial, and eventually they overtook the sundial in that they were more adaptable to environmental influences. Clock evolved to the point where it could be used on ships and such, but it was still subject to environmental pressure and evolution, a more solid structure. The pendulum clock and the pendulum clock ruled the Earth for a long time, but it was subject to the same environmental pressures, i.e. seafaring. And so we due to this environmental pressure, there was a need for this pendulum clock to evolve into something that didn't have a pendulum, something that wasn't contingent upon a movement back and forth of a pendulum. Therefore, it evolved to have no pendulum. And for decades or eons, the manufacturing process of the pendulum clock had gone unchanged, basically. Little tweaks here and there, such as in any species, and then it evolved further to lose its pendulum and become based more on cogs, which a pendulum clock had. But once they discovered that you didn't need the pendulum, it went away, and a new paradigm shift took place. Its distribution in the world was made smaller by its inability to evolve to fit its needs. It fits into a specific niche, just like the sundial does now. So now a new paradigm shift is taking place, and you have cog-based clocks, and for millennia, cog-based clocks had ruled the world and reproduced in mass until such time as crystal-based clocks evolved. Anyway, the crystal-based clock evolved and took over the former spot of the of the cog-based clock and became the end-all be-all of watches. Okay, due to environmental pressures, in this case the need for a more accurate clock, the genetic code was further manipulated. Genetic code here represented by mankind's design of the watch. The genetic code was further manipulated to evolve the crystal watch, take the basic principle of the crystal watch, which is the vibration of the crystal at a specific frequency, and evolve that into using electrons and photons vibrating at specific frequencies. All watches are based on movement. Movement of the sun, which was the original sundial, movement of water, which was the water clock, the movement of the pendulum, which was the pendulum clock, the movement of the cogs, which was the cog-based watch, and the vibration of the crystal at a specific rate, the crystal-based watch, and now we have the electron proton photon watches, which are based upon the vibration or movement of particles at specific rates. Each clock evolves to become more and more accurate. And I know this has nothing to do with the design issue, but I find it interesting that the watchmaker's analogy